right now, if you're them going into Abu Dhabi, you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
For whatever reason, they never hit the ground running in San Francisco. I don't feel anyone this season has shown themselves to have nailed the starting strategy.
Traditionally, I would have said that, is the best starter out of that group.
I think Slingsby's going to decide whether it's a drag race or whether it's a fight.
You have basically 10 minutes from knowing you're in the grand final to then racing for $2 million.
If there's one thing that really does affect every sport, it's momentum. And with the grand final in Abu Dhabi coming up, some teams are coming in really hot and other teams are coming in cold. Lisa, who's coming into this one with all the momentum?
Oh, it's got to be Emirates Great Britain. The second half of their season has been incredible. I think the way that they're sailing is really dynamic, really aggressive. Right now, if you're them going into Abu Dhabi, you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
How much does that pain you to say?
Oh, it hurts my soul. I mean, obviously, as an Aussie, there's not many options when I've got New Zealand and GBR to pick from. So it's
You were just like, GBR coming in. Does momentum have a big impact, do you reckon, Stevie?
I think it's huge. I mean, we got to the final event last year. Obviously it comes down to one race, so there's always a way that one team will or won't win, but I couldn't really see the Kiwis not winning it. I thought the Black Foils are going to win. They've got, they've been sailing so well all year, and then, they just, for whatever reason, they never hit the ground running in San Francisco. I think Great Britain have the momentum right now, but I think it comes down to that weekend. I think that's what's so exciting, and that's where it's hard for a team like Great Britain. Spain, we've got to be on it. We've got to win or be in the first two in that event, I think, to have a chance at the final. So they're going to come out firing. Bond's Flying Rouge, they've kind of still got to go for it. They can't sit back. Black Foils, probably in the perfect spot, I'd say. A little bit of pressure. Can't afford to sort of think, oh, let's not lose it. How do we build momentum through the weekend? Come back to your momentum word. Emirates GBR, I think that momentum will be hard because they're going to be petrified. The only way we don't get to the final is if we do something stupid. Let's sort of keep ourselves out of things, but then you don't get yourself up to operating temperature.
I kind of disagree with you. I think that Emirates Great Britain are in such a comfortable position that they can afford just to go for the win and not worry about anyone else. Whereas like New Zealand, Australia, whilst they're going for the win, they've still got their, looking over their shoulder, making sure that they're protecting their position. So whilst I agree, like the pressure's not there, when you look at a team coming in that like they can just go for the win. Obviously they have to look after the asset, but they can kind of like go for the win and then like continue that momentum into the final. Just like, in previous years going to San Francisco, the Australians, whilst they were, locked into that final, they could go in and they're like, we're here to win San Francisco and then the grand final. And I think that's the mindset that you need to take into it. Australia are in a tough situation because they don't have the luxury to do that. Whilst they've got the pressure they probably should win the event to lock themselves in, they've still got to protect their position.
Yeah, fair enough.
You just
She makes a very good point, to be fair. I mean, I do think they do have that freedom. I mean, that probably says way too much about me and my negative, cautious mindset of, let's just get to the final and don't do anything silly. Whereas, yes, they do have that opportunity to take it on. But I think that it's going to be about momentum going through the event in Abu Dhabi. That'll be the momentum that's maybe more important. If maybe we were a week after Cadiz and we were straight into another event like that European leg where I think you saw the British kind of carried that wave from Portsmouth all the way through, in the same way as, North Star Canada sort of almost carried a disappointing time, having been on fire through an American leg. None of the teams are going to have momentum directly into this event. They're all going to be refining their feet. How do you grow through the event to come out and ultimately you got to win one race?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is like looking at Saturday versus Sunday in Abu Dhabi, because Sunday it's like you have basically 10 minutes from knowing you're in the grand final to then racing for $2 million.
Yeah.
So that last race, I often say that you've got to feel good to go good. And I think that is the case for many of the athletes. So they're coming off the back of a good race or a good race day and then going into that final. I think it's just like, we can do that. And that sort of like belief. Whereas if you haven't really been sailing to the level that you can, you're like, I've got to pull it out for this one.
But do you, of those four teams, they'll be approaching this 6 weeks as if we're we're in the final. How do we approach that final, won't they?
Yeah.
And they'll...
Yeah, I think there's two things. It's one, how do we lock ourselves in the final? And then, okay, how do we look at the final? Because they've got enough time to kind of look at both situations. And looking at the final is looking at the different top three that it could be, looking at how they approach finals, how they approach the pre-start, working out their tactics, like learning your opponent. And so they'll be learning their opponents in fleet racing and finals racing, and kind of, I think the thing is you get such little time training and racing and simulating the situations on the water that you've got to do all the homework off the water, so that when you see it play out, you're like, I know what to do. So
you're saying like the best way to increase that momentum is just to approach the event like any other. You just want to make that final race and just not worry about the huge amount of money and prize that's on the line. I think
that's where my mindset gets to. I mean, as I say, I agree with Lisa. I just think, if you're the Britisher, you're going to back out of situations where normally you need to, you go for that corner if you need the points, and you've got that sharpness that you're going to need in the final. Do you go, I don't want to be silly here? We'll find out, I suppose, won't we? I can see why you might go for it, but you don't want...
scale, I think. It's like, is he going to hook the black foils on the last turning mark in the last fleet race? Maybe not. But is he going to do it in the final? 100% yes.
Yeah. So I think you build that momentum through, they've got a lot of learning. What will be nice for the teams, there's a lot of learning to do. We've mentioned the new equipment, the potentially these new 27.5 metre wings. We know they've got the new bigger foils, the T-foils there that they're all still learning. So there's quite an exciting thing as a coach to sort of grow through it and learn, and it's...
One thing that you kind of said is like, that is very different in terms of like who has kind of the upper hand. Is if the British are a bit more comfortable for their three-way final, they can maybe play around in the races leading up with their moding, or like trying to learn the new 27.5 metre wing, whereas like, they've got a little bit more scope to try things. Whereas, Australia, Spain, they can't just be like, let's try this and see what happens. They've got to kind of work within their limits at the time.
And when it comes to historical events in that region, the Black Foils would have a lot of confidence going into this event. Does that play a part, or is it just a new start for them?
I think yes. I think, if you've got a good track record there, you're super confident. I think Pete obviously loves racing there. It might suit his style a little bit more than maybe other events. So I think you definitely have the confidence. But then in saying that, I think everyone's grown so much throughout the last season that you kind of can't bank on what happened 10 months ago.
Yeah. And another point on that as well is that all these boats have had various appearances in finals throughout the season, but we've never seen a potential Bonds Flying Rouge, Black Foils, Emirates Great Britain final.
How wild is that? I find that so strange, but it's pretty cool. I think I'm really excited because I think with those three, or even if the Spanish are in there, the level is just going to be so high that it's like a take no prisoners. And like how that pre-start plays out, that 2 minutes leading into the start of the grand final, is just going to be so cool to watch, and I'm sure Stevie will do a fantastic job explaining everything.
Yeah, let's get into the strategy, Stevie.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting in that it's because they haven't been in a final together. I think the thing I find interesting is I don't feel anyone this season has shown themselves to have nailed the starting strategy. Maybe as everyone's got a bit better, or there's levels of uncertainty. If you've got the team that comes in first that leads that decision. I think that'll be Slingsby. He likes to make the first decision. Burling often has a bit of a sort of a bigger picture strategy, and he might then set himself up wide to be that attacker. But then you've got the Fletcher and Botine. I still think it's going to be Fletcher, unfortunately for the Spanish, but we'll see. They're much more reactionary, late decision. Let's see where everyone comes in, and I'm manoeuvring maybe at 35, 40 seconds till the start, based off where I see them. And that's where it gets interesting, because if Slingsby's a little bit early with that first decision, he makes himself an absolute sort of sucker for it. If he's late coming back on there, I think we'll see all the boats sort of just on a run up and early. If he's early, I think we'll see a real fight, and maybe Tom. Well, you do now, mate, knows that that's a way to play it. If he leads that decision, and he's going to force Fletcher to have to go early as well, force Burling to then make a decision and come on the attack. But I think it's always that decision maker, that leader versus the attacker. How do you play that game? And we've not seen it played all that well, I don't feel, this year. The teams have often maybe been a little bit behind with their timings on a run-up and quite late for the start. We've not seen a real sort of jiggery, pokery type fight. That's a very odd use of words. A little tight sort of fight in there. And yeah, I mean, that's why I can't wait for it. But I do think Slingsby likes to own the pre-start and be that first one making the decision. This is my timing. I've planned this timing for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I know that I'm turning back at 55 seconds, 450 metres from the start line, and I've got to sail at this speed to burn this much time in that. Now, you guys make your call off that. Fletcher loves that reactionary side of it, you know. So it'd be super interesting. I don't think any of them have really nailed it. Burling was first at Mark 1 in Cadiz. So, you know, is he the form guy coming into the final? I don't know. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think it's been really interesting watching starts play out, and it's very different to a final, to a fleet race. But, you know, traditionally I would have said that, you know, Pete is the best starter out of that group. I think the beginning of the season, Tom was doing a great job getting off the start line, and then, you know, Cadiz, that's where they came undone. So kind of in that sense, I agree with you. I think that if I had to pick, I would say Pete is probably going to be the strongest on the start, but I think Tom has definitely been a different starter than we've seen before, and I think that he's definitely got it in him. He's got that, like, he would have, as you said, thought about it every night for the last 6 weeks about how he's going to take it on. And I think, you know, Dylan, we just haven't really seen do a great job of the final starts. Everyone's been late a lot of the time. The other thing that, looking back at this season, I think we've had also a bit of a weird start box. So our start boxes haven't been as sort of like big open space, big run up, which I think where the Kiwis have come undone a little bit. And with Abu Dhabi, I think with the wind direction, they'll be kind of shoved up next to the seawall. So how they get that run in and how they do that final approach, they'll kind of be limited by geography.
Something I always find really interesting in those I mean, they get tons of chances to do the fleet race starts where there's 12 boats on the start line, but they get very few chances to practice the 3 boat starts. And something I've noticed is that often 2 boats will get caught up focusing on each other, leaving a lot of clear air and space for a third boat to come out. And like we saw Germany do that, I think in Geneva when they won the event. What's the strategy around that, and how do you approach it? Do you just try and stay clear of everyone to keep as much clear air as possible in an event like Abu Dhabi?
I think a lot of that depends on how short the leg to Mark 1 is. So if that leg is short, you've got to really be on the inside. Yeah. So you've got to be at the downwind end of the line, and it turns into quite a fight because you want to be on the inside of the turn at Mark 1. If it's longer, I think then you see the boats spread out, and it turns into a bit more of a drag race where a bit of space isn't such a thing because it's right, how fast can we send the boat along here? I think Slingsby will make that decision for the fleet.
Okay, interesting.
Because I think if he turns back slightly earlier than he should, and he's going to bring the whole game close to the start line, and then as soon as you're early, like Lisa's saying, they've often been late, which she's completely right with, they have. As soon as you're early, you've then got to go slower, which means you can be hunted. Okay? You know, if you want to actually hunt someone or attack them, you need a speed differential. But if you're all back and on a run-up on your timing, well, then it's just
there's no engagement.
It's just a drag.
Yeah.
If Slingsby thinks, right, I'm going to turn this into a bit of a scrap, I'll turn back a bit early and let them come at me. And then I'll know I've got my plan of how I'm going to manage that and everything. Then we could, I think, see it play out. So I think Slingsby's going to decide whether it's a drag race or whether it's a fight.
Yeah, the other thing is like that with that attacking, like kind of talking about how do you attack somebody. Like some people are really good at it and some people don't do a good job of it. And I think that's the thing is like knowing how much to hurt them. So like, you know, slow them down, but give you enough space to sort of like take off and get to full run again. And that's what the problem was in Geneva is like they got into hurting the Swiss so much that they kind of compromise their whole race. But if you can give them a little bit of a, hey, don't do that, and then go away, rather than fully try ruin their race and compromise yours.
Yeah, because it's like the Kiwis in Cadiz. Won the start, big gap on the British, and then he sailed the Germans up to try and open the gap to come down. but he overplayed his hand.
Yeah.
And so rather than, it was the right move to have a good exit from Mark 1, but he played it so aggressively that it meant that instead of being 100 metres back, the British were just 20 metres back, whereas he could have almost put them out of the rate. But he'll have learnt from that. He was probably playing around thinking, this is, a situation, how do I manage this and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's always that's why it's so good that there's 3 boats in the final.
Yeah.
Because if it's just a one-on-one match race, I mean, there is obviously that, it's a great sort of style of racing, but you are just racing that one boat and it doesn't matter how fast you go. You've got to be going fast in this, but it's how can I get a cheap jab?
Yeah,
and make that.
Not the money making.
But it's how do you get that cheap shot in or make a move on them, and then where do you choose your position to fight?
You just don't want to do a France in Saint-Tropez when they just came across the whole fleet at the beginning. Another really important part of momentum is the vibes on board and the teams gelling. If I was to ask you who you think has gelled most across this season, who would you say?
I think I've heard the British team really grow together as a team. It's not. I'm going to get accused of being biased to the British, probably. I think the Kiwis have The Kiwis have an ice cold way of operating, and that's again in some ways. I don't know that it'll matter what vibe the Kiwis are in. I think you get Kiwi. I think it matters massively to the Australians because Slingsby, when he thinks he's the best, is almost unplayable.
Yeah.
But he can get in his own head and feel like it's not fair or he's not on form or whatever. So I think who's gelled the best, I think over the season, the British are the team that have grown and that's why they're the form. But again, we're going to get to this final. The Spanish are so tight, they had that sort of, band of brothers, didn't they, when they went out and won last year from nowhere and sister, of course, yeah. But they when they got a job on to get to the final. It's going to be hard for them. If they make the final, I reckon they'll win.
The vibes
will be through the roof. It'll be full Macarena. It'll just be going on. They'll be buzzing before they get to that final. So if Spain make it, then I just think that there'll be so much momentum. It'll be unbelievable, and they'll be untouchable. But I still, my boring British side says it's going to be the top 3 that we have now, and then Slingsby needs to be on form. Burling, you're just going to get Burling. And I think the British a little bit, they haven't maybe fully pressure tested under the extreme pressure, but they've grown through the season very impressively.
It's clear that momentum has a massive part to play in the Abu Dhabi Grand Final that's coming up. Which teams will bring the vibes and which teams will struggle? We'll see very shortly.